Hi and welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. Today I want to talk to you about how to create a length of spike weave. Now there are a number of applications for this particular project and I may in the future bring some complete projects that utilise the spike weave. But for today I want to show you how to effectively and neatly create a lovely length that you can use in any of your own projects. Now the history of this spike weave, it's been around a little while. I didn't invent it, but I first came to it about two and a half years ago when I was working on a project for a Celtic dragon. Now, the actor that played Batman in the 1960s, Adam West, had not long since passed away, and I was a great admirer of his work. So I decided to name my Celtic dragon, rather bizarrely, the Adam West dragon. And the reason I'm telling you about Adam is because I wanted to create some freestanding little spikes on the back of his head and neck there, kind of a little bit like those you might see on a dinosaur. So I decided that I would work out a way in which I could create that in a freestanding fashion. So I'm just going to pop Adam up behind us so he can watch proceedings and hopefully join in. I think I've hung him up backwards, but he can hang out, it's all good. Oh, he's going to have a spin. Let's just turn that round the other way. There we go. That's better. So let's talk about what we need and what we're going to actually finish up with. If we look down at the board now, this is what we're looking to create. This is a little length of spike weave, and at the end of the video I'm going to show you some of the pieces that you can create utilising this particular weave. Now there are a number of ways in which you can create this, but I'm just going to show you the way that I've come up with and it seems to be effective, and I've worn some of these pieces of jewellery for a while now and they're still hanging out in the right place, so I'm guessing that it's long lasting. Materials. I've got a great big brand new 1 kilogram reel of 0.6mm gauge silver plated copper wire. In the description of the video today I will add a link to the place where I've purchased this from. The quality of the wire is absolutely outstanding. There is no need for prior conditioning. As you use it, it's ready and just physically ready to go. It's absolutely superb. Tools that we're going to be using today, back down to the board, are any flat facing pliers. So these are my bent chain nose pliers. But if you have a relatively fine tapered tip on some flat facing pliers, you'll be absolutely fine. I'm also going to be using flush cutters. Now, I will use my flush cutters pretty much every time I'm making jewellery. They give you a really nice, neat finish. You can refer back to our video all about the usage of tools and the whys and wherefores. If you don't have flush cutters, it's not massively important for this project because there isn't a vast amount of cutting anyway. I've also got with me here today 4 short lengths of raw copper wire. Now this is 1.25mm gauge wire. The reason I'm using 1.25mm is because it means I can get 2 passes of a 0.6mm gauge wire in the aperture on the base, which is how we're mostly going to be using the spike weave. It's the strongest section with the most passes of wire around it, and it is the section that you would most likely be using to join it to another project. If you wanted to pass a heavier gauge or a heavier aggregate gauge of wire through that aperture, then consider using a larger diameter or a larger gauge wire for your rods that you can refer to them as rods or as wires, it's entirely up to you. What I'm going to do now is just talk you through the basic process of creating the spike weave. So I'm just going to pop my tools over to one side for the second and leave that up at the top, and we're going to talk about the rods or the wires. Now I will probably refer to them both as wires and as rods throughout the demonstration. This is our base wire or base rod, and even when the design is up the other way, this is going to have most of the action going on, and so we will refer to it as the base wire. I'm going to start off by moving a short length of the 0.6mm gauge off the reel. We're working on the reel so that there's zero wastage. I'm going to work with a tail of around about 8 inches. Starting with my base wire, I'm going to spin this 0.6mm gauge all the way around 4 times. Now what we want is for that to be side by side and look like a little coil. So I've got 3 times there, and there's the 4th. If that is opening up, there's a really lovely technique that you can use throughout all of this and out all of your wire weaving. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one of the sides of my pliers underneath the base wire and one above it, and just draw that together. And in so much you're not disturbing too much of the wire, you don't accidentally squish it and scar the surface, but what you are doing is generating a really lovely, neat, taut finish. The next section is to start building our spikes. So I'm going to offer in wire number 2. Now there needs to be a little bit of a gap, so you can use a thumbnail to just kind of gauge that they're not completely shunted up side by side. We need to have a bit of space. We're always working with our wire in the same direction, so from this angle we're going over the top, down, back underneath, up, over the top and down. So what I'm going to do now is wrap twice around my base wire and my second wire. Once and twice, and I'm just going to take that tail down the back for a second so you can see 4 on the base wire, 2 on base and the second. What I need to do now is bring the tail of my wire up between the base wire and wire number 2, and then push the tail upwards. Like I said, it's like a crank handle. I don't know if any of you are old enough to have used a mangle, but it's very much like that, or starting a very old car perhaps. So back to our demonstration on the board. We are now going to offer in our third wire and get that to sit side by side. What I'm now going to do is wrap twice around wire 2 and wire 3. So drawing that down behind, I now need to bring that tail of wire up between base wire and wire 2, over again and back down. I'm going to offer in my fourth and final rod or wire, and you can see that it's turned in slightly at the bottom. So I'm just going to turn the very tip of the wire up and away. This will make my life easier, and I guarantee that you won't run through these rods in a very short amount of time, even if you use them a lot. Raw copper is really well worthwhile having in your stash anyway. I've been using these solidly for 2.5 years for all of my spike weave projects, and they're still going. No big deal. So what we're going to do is bring the tail of the wire now up between rod number 2 and rod number 3. Pull that nice and firmly against the weave that we've created so far and push that upwards. So again, we're just cranking in completely the same direction all the time. I'm now going to wrap twice around 3 and 4. Once, draw the tail up between number 2 and number 3, back down and back down, like so. So you can see we've created the first half of our mountain. What I want to do now is bring the tail of the wire behind the project all the way down flat, and at this stage I'm just going to offer my pliers either side of the project and give that a bit of a scooch up so that it sits neatly and tightly. And you can just play around with the ends of the wires here or the rods to just make them nice and neat and tidy. So the next stage of the project is to bring that weave back down the slope of the mountain. So I'm going to bring my wire now up between the base rod and rod number 2, like so. Pull that nice and firmly against the project, and I'm now going to again wrap twice around rod 2 and rod 3. So down between 3 and 4, push it tight, up between base and 2, up again, push nice and tight, down between 3 and 4, and you will find that you get into a bit of a rhythm. So you've probably guessed that now we're going to wrap around base and 2. So that started to come apart slightly, so I'm just going to offer my pliers against that and give it a bit of a scooch. And then I'm going to open the base wire slightly so that it's easy for me to put that second wrap around base wire and wire number 2. Bring those back into true, and then we are going to wrap 4 times around the base wire. Actually, what I'm going to do is, because this is going to be one end, is I'm just going to wrap twice. And the reason that I've decided for this sequence is twice on the end, 4 times between each mountain, and then when you cut them and join them together, if you wanted to make a sun design or a circular design, then it looks completely seamless, and it will look, where you join the 2 ends together, as if you've just done the 4 wraps. So I'll show you now how to just turn that over and trim it off at the back. First thing you need to do is make sure that's nice and firm and you're happy with the shape of your mountain. As long as both wires are pointing flat downwards away from the base wire, it is safe for us to give that a nice hearty squeeze with flat pliers. Flipping the design over, you will see that it is unequal because you will have 3 singular stripes going up one side and then 3s going down the other side. So I'm just going to use my flush cutters to come in as close as I can here and trim away the residue, and then just give that a bit of a squish. Again, we're utilising the technique where we've got one side of the pliers above and one side below, and that just brings everything into true. Looking at it from the top, pull that in nice and tight and give it a squeeze. So what I tend to do now, because we're now going to be working with the end of the wire that is still attached to the reel, it's not difficult, but it is better now that we've got into a rhythm to be able to show you how I would move on from here. So flipping over, my base wire turns to the top. Now, I am right-handed, so I'm working in this direction. If you're left-handed, you may prefer to do that in a different orientation. So turning that over like so, and you can see that we've still got our 4 passes of wire, and then 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and then because that's the end, there's 2 single passes on the base here. So I'm going to show you one more time, rather speeded up, how to create one of our little mountains. So here we go. Twice around the base and second wire, and you just need to spin off some loose from the reel. 1 and 2. That sometimes happens, you just need to draw that back out, pull that back into position, and you can at this stage, if you desire, just open out the ends of your rods to make your life that little bit easier. They do tend to spin inside the project though, so just be warned. So then we're going to go 2 around our number 2 and number 3 rods, or the middle 2, pull that up nice and tight, and then 2 around number 3 and number 4 together, and you can see that we're already starting to build up a nice spike weave as we go. So 2 around the central 2 wires, 2 around the base wires, 1 and 2, and then we're going to go for 4 around just the base wire, 3 and 4. Every time you've created a mountain peak, give it a scooch up like so, and then squash it flat. Now, through the magic of me turning the video camera off for a moment and turning it back on in a second, the magic of YouTube, I am going to create a couple more mountains and show you then how to move the rods inside the project. So, I'll be right back in a second.